They say the Byzantine Empire was a dazzling world of gold, incense, velvet processions, and holy relics, a realm where emperors ruled with divine authority, and the capital, Constantinople, shone like a jewel on the world stage. But step behind the polished marbles, the glowing mosaics, and the hymns echoing through Hagia Sophia, and you find a very different Byzantium. A Byzantium that thrived not only on devotion and intellect, but on spectacle, humiliation, and violence so controlled and so deliberate that its purpose went far beyond entertainment. It was social, discipline disguised as amusement, political messaging wrapped in bloodshed, and psychological warfare performed in front of cheering crowds. Before we dive deeper into these arena horrors that history tried to bury, let me ask you something important before proceeding. Tell me, where in the world are you watching this from today? Because what follows isn't just history. It's a mirror into how power chooses to entertain itself, shape crowds, and intimidate entire populations. The Hippodrome of Constantinople was the beating heart of the empire, long before the Ottoman conquest. But unlike the Roman Colosseum, known for gladiators, beasts, and mass slaughter, the Byzantines took a more calculated approach. Their spectacles weren't simply blood sports. They were political theater. Every punishment, every humiliation, every stage ritual served a purpose. To remind people who ruled, to crush rivals, to display divine authority, and sometimes simply to satisfy an appetite for cruelty wrapped beneath the polished veneer of imperial order. The chariot races were the supposed main attraction, but for many spectators, the darker moments were what truly electrified the air. The Hippodrome had become a space where the line between entertainment and state punishment blurred so completely that the audience often couldn't tell whether they were watching justice or a show crafted purely to shock and silence them. One of the most chilling practices took place during the intervals between races, when the crowd was restless and hungry for distraction. Instead of letting tensions rise, officials introduced ritualized punishments right on the track. Prisoners, rebels, traitors, and sometimes even political scapegoats were dragged out in chains. They were displayed like living warnings, marched before tens of thousands of citizens who understood exactly what message the emperor was sending. Disobedience has consequences, and those consequences will not be hidden, they will be celebrated. Some punishments were purely psychological, forced bowing before the factions, public insults, staged mock trials where verdicts were already sealed. But others were designed to linger in memory. One of the most infamous was the race of condemnation. A prisoner would be tied behind a chariot, the ropes cutting into flesh. And as the charioteers whipped their horses, the victim would be dragged across the track's unforgiving surface. The Byzantines claimed this was a symbolic reenactment of treason being trampled by imperial power. But the crowd understood the reality. It was slow, public destruction gruesome, humiliating, and impossible to look away from. Other times, the condemned were dressed in costumes meant to ridicule them, robes of mock royalty to insult pretenders, heavy animal skins to depict them as beasts, masks carved into grotesque parodies of human faces. The message was simple. The empire chooses what you are, human or less than human, and chooses how you will exit the world. These events were not random punishments thrown into the day's schedule. They were carefully choreographed. The Hippodrome factions, the blues and the greens, were deeply involved. Sometimes they jeered and mocked the condemned. Other times they cheered for harsher punishment, using their voices as a weapon to pressure officials. What made these rituals even more disturbing was how easily the crowd could shift from celebrating a victory in the races to laughing at someone as suffering moments later. The same hands that waved faction banners could just as easily applaud a public execution. The empire knew this and used it. Emperors would occasionally appear in the imperial box, watching from the kathisma as if observing a well-rehearsed performance. Their presence intensified everything, because every act of punishment unfolded beneath the gaze of someone who claimed divine right. To defy the emperor was to defy God, and the arena became the perfect place to make the lesson unforgettable. Sometimes the brutality became even more theatrical. In certain rituals, condemned criminals were paired with animals not for combat as in Roman days, but for humiliation. A prisoner might be forced to act out a scene from mythology where their role ended in disaster. There were stories of men tied to mechanical bulls, mocked as false heroes. Others were made to perform absurd dances before being beaten or exiled. These weren't chaotic or improvisational. They were scripted spectacles designed to turn punishment into a twisted form of art. One notorious ritual involved a condemned man being brought out wearing wings fashioned from feathers and wax. He was forced to reenact the myth of Icarus, stumbling around the arena as the crowd roared in amusement. At the climax, he would be pushed or dropped from a platform never high enough to kill outright, but enough to shatter bones and leave him broken. It was a message wrapped in myth: fly too close to power, and you will fall. But the darkest rituals were the ones deliberately erased from Byzantine records. Events whispered in chronicles, hinted at in sermons, or preserved in outsider accounts. These were the rituals that involved blinding, mutilation, staged confessions, and transformations of the condemned into living symbols of defeat. Byzantium was known for preferring mutilation over execution, and sometimes these punishments occurred right in the hippodrome, where the crowd could witness the moment a person's future was stolen. Whether it was a nose cut off to mark shame, eyes burned out to prevent rebellion, or tendons sliced to cripple potential threats. These acts were not only physical violence, they were symbolic, public, and deeply psychological. The audience wasn't just watching a body being damaged. They were watching a soul being silenced. And perhaps the most chilling part of all this was how normal it became. Spectators brought their children. Vendors sold food. People debated punishments like they debated race scores. It was entertainment woven tightly with social control, disguised beneath religious rituals and imperial ceremonies that made violence feel like destiny rather than cruelty. This was Byzantium's hidden face, polished in gold on the surface, but underneath, driven by fear, spectacle, and the unspoken truth that power must be seen to be believed. And nothing displayed power more vividly than a ritual that turned a human life into a warning, watched by thousands. But what truly set Byzantium apart from Rome wasn't the scale of their brutality. It was the precision of it. Violence was never random, never chaotic, never purely for gore. It was crafted, calculated, engineered to send a message so clearly that a single injury could speak louder than a public execution. And nowhere was this more evident than in the punishments reserved for political rivals or anyone accused of plotting against the emperor. Unlike Rome, Byzantium preferred to leave its enemies alive, broken, humiliated, but alive so they could serve as living reminders of what defiance cost. And many of these punishments were performed right in the hippodrome, where tens of thousands could watch a powerful man transformed into a helpless symbol of imperial dominance. One of the most infamous spectacles involved the ritual of blinding, a punishment so strongly associated with Byzantine politics that chroniclers wrote about it with a kind of grim familiarity. In some cases, the condemned was led into the arena with a ceremonial procession, surrounded by guards dressed in ornate armor, holding torches and banners. The crowd already knew what was about to happen. The victim often did too. Some reportedly fainted before the act even began. To the Byzantines, the eyes were not just organs. They were the seat of ambition. Removing them was a way of extinguishing a person's future. The moment the red-hot iron was brought out, the arena fell silent. It wasn't cheering that dominated the spectacle, it was a silence more chilling than any roar. A silence that meant fear. A silence that meant obedience. A silence that told every citizen, every noble, every faction leader, that the emperor's power didn't just end lives, it could erase destiny. Some punishments went even further. Another ritual involved cutting tendons behind the knees, permanently crippling the condemned and ensuring they would never stand tall again, literally or symbolically. Sometimes the condemned were forced to crawl around the arena afterward, their broken bodies displayed like living artifacts of imperial victory. They were paraded before the factions, mocked or pitied, and finally dragged away to spend the rest of their life hidden from public view, unable to challenge anyone again. And yet, even that wasn't the darkest part. Byzantium perfected the art of staged humiliation acts designed to crush a person's dignity long before their body was harmed. One recorded punishment involved dressing a once powerful noble in a woman's veil, placing him on a donkey facing backward, and parading him around the hippodrome while the crowd hurled insults. Another condemned man was forced to wear a puppet-like costume with bells, dancing around the track as soldiers struck him with sticks each time he stumbled. It wasn't about the pain, it was about the symbolism. If the emperor could force a nobleman to become the empire's clown, then no one, not even the highest born, could claim immunity. There were even rituals that bordered on psychological torment. Some victims were forced to confess their crimes in front of the crowd, even when the crimes were fabricated. Scripts were written in advance, and if the condemned refused to speak, they were beaten until they complied. The audience wasn't just watching a punishment, they were participating in a narrative. Crafted by the ruling elite, they were witnessing the rewriting of reality, performed live. Even religious symbolism sometimes entered these spectacles. In one disturbing ritual, a condemned traitor was forced to wear a mock halo made of thorns, a twisted parody of saintly iconography. The message was clear. Only the emperor chose who was holy and who was damned. Only the emperor decided who lived with honor and who died in shame. And yet, for all its brutality, the arena served another purpose. It allowed the people to release their anger safely in a space controlled by the state. The crowd shouted, protested, pleaded for mercy, or demanded harsher punishment. They felt powerful in that moment, but in reality, they were participating in a system designed to funnel their emotion exactly where the empire wanted it to go. The hippodrome was a vent, a pressure valve, a place where rage and fear flowed in circles, never upward, never threatening the throne. But what truly makes these rituals haunting is not the cruelty itself, it is how easily they were forgotten, how effectively the empire buried them beneath stories of piety, diplomacy, theology, and beauty. The Byzantines were masters not just of ritual, but of rewriting history. Many of the worst spectacles were erased from official chronicles, surviving only through foreign diplomats, monks who disapproved, or whispers in the margins of manuscripts. It raises a chilling question. If this is what survived, what was erased? What rituals were so horrifying that even an empire comfortable with blinding and mutilation refused to record them? Some historians believe that the most brutal punishments happened after major uprisings, such as the Nika Revolt. Tens of thousands were killed in that uprising. But what happened inside the hippodrome in the weeks afterward remains disturbingly unclear. Rumors speak of mass punishments, forced executions, and ritual humiliations designed to reassert control. None of it made it into the official records. In Byzantium, silence was often more telling than words. Even today, standing in the modern hippodrome of Istanbul, it's almost impossible to imagine the horrors that once unfolded there. Tourists take photos, children run through the open space, and vendors sell snacks where thousands once screamed for blood or mercy. The stones remember what the empire tried to forget, and that is why these forgotten arena rituals matter. They reveal a truth that shines through every empire, every age, every civilization. Power is never just about ruling. It is about being seen ruling. It is about crafting a spectacle so unforgettable that no one dares to challenge it. Byzantium understood this better than most and used the hippodrome as its stage. If you've made it this far into the story, you already understand something important. History isn't just about battles and buildings. It's about the parts that someone tried to erase. The parts that make us uncomfortable. The parts that remind us how close beauty and brutality can exist side by side. And if you want more stories that peel back the polished surface of ancient empires and reveal the darkness beneath, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what empire you want me to uncover next. And if this dive into Byzantium's hidden spectacles shocked you, share it, because these are the chapters of history that deserve to be seen, not forgotten.